Welcome to XP42, and today we're talking to Tim Stevens, who is the digital innovation guy at Jasmax, which is one of the premier architecture firms in rainy New Zealand.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Tim.
Thanks,
so what I want to talk about, and it's always a hard thing, or I guess it's not assumed where digital innovation and architecture fit. Like there's this bit of a discrepancy in the mental model of like how I think about this. So how did you get started? I'm obviously assuming you studied architecture at some stage, right?
Yeah,
so
I did. That's right.
how did you get here? How did you become the digital innovation guy?
Yeah, it's it's a really interesting story, and you did right. I studied architecture, so I did a Bachelor of Architecture at Unitec here in Auckland. It was probably about graduated 12 years or so ago, so it was a 5-year degree, that one. And so after that, I worked for a couple of years in Auckland at one of the other large design practices. And then spent a year after that. We were getting itchy feet, me and my then wife, and so we actually did a year living in South America, in Chile, in Santiago, which was pretty interesting. And then after that, we thought, okay, right, we've had enough of that. That's our Spanish wasn't what was better than when we arrived, but it's pretty ordinary
still. Speak it?
But don't test me on that, mate. Don't test me. No.
Okay.
So I can order a beer, right? That's the main thing.
And that's the most important thing, to order a beer. That's right. But what does it look like? I mean, when you were obviously starting up in is starting up in architecture like a little bit of a pain? Is it the grunt work? Is it?
Oh, sure.
And did you at that stage think, I'm going to be the innovation guy?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Right,
Zero,
right. So that thought process,
not.
that's
just been a development, I guess, a natural progression of my career, interestingly. So, and I think probably a lot of it, and I guess I'll circle back around to it, but I've always been interested in working as efficiently as I can, and technology's been a big part of bringing efficiencies to the way I work, but also have been really fascinated by the visualization side of the game as well. So we did. So after South America, we spent 6 years living in Brisbane, in Australia, and in that time I worked for a number of practices, but then started to develop a bit of an interest in transport infrastructure projects.
Right.
So complex
stuff,
city building stuff, So that was really great, and that actually set me up really well for when we moved back here about three or 4 years ago now. I slotted into the urban projects team here at Jasmax, and I was lucky enough to work on some really interesting projects like City Rail Link. And interestingly, City Rail Link was the first project that we cut our teeth on with VR. Right.
Yeah. So I mean, how long ago was this, and when was?
I think that was probably 3 years ago.
Right.
Now,
so fairly in the time scale of when VR was sort of becoming a.
That's right. It was in its
affordable.
infancy. Yeah, that's right. It was in its infancy back then. I remember I was working on that project, and I was aware of VR. I'm always fascinated by new and shiny things. And so I ended up hiring a pair of Oculus goggles, a developer kit, and then tried to find some software that would allow us to go from our SketchUp models, which SketchUp's one of our main concept softwares, and so we started to explore a workflow and work out what this technology actually meant for us as designers.
But when you how skunkworks was it? Did you go in with like a full-on business plan?
Oh no, absolutely not.
You were really just tinkering and experimenting with that.
Absolutely right. And I think that's why what I've really enjoyed about Jasmax is that they were from day one, they were really supportive of that tinkering. Right. Whereas I've been lucky enough to work I guess in maybe 6 or 7 different practices in my career, and so I've got a good insight into different cultures, different practice cultures.
And is it because Jasmax has a legacy of that tinkering, or is it something that happened fairly?
It might have, but I guess it's up to your managers and the team that you're working on, if they give you enough bandwidth to tinker over here, because we all sort of think that there might be some value in it. So it was.
Is it a New Zealand thing, do you reckon?
Look, it could be. Yeah, it's interesting. I've never considered that. I haven't sort of looked back on that and analysed it, but it absolutely could be. As that curiosity, I guess, that's led us to explore a lot of really interesting stuff over the last few years. We developed that, and what was interesting about VR is that it was a medium. It was the first medium that allowed us to explore a project and understand the volume of a space and the scale of a space. It was. I mean, we've got a range of other mediums that communicate materiality and what this thing kind of looks like, but nothing until that point allowed us to feel what
But that's
it was
what
like
I
in
always
that
found really intriguing about architects in general, right? Like the ability to visualize this, what they are essentially building in a two-dimensional space. And it's been done like that for years, like centuries, right?
Yeah, a long time.
And what did that transition look like for a lot of the architects? I mean, especially, what does the experience look like for people experiencing that for the first time, especially for architects?
Yeah. Oh, look, it gave me such a buzz in those early days because, and because now people are exposed to VR experiences like games and everything, and so. Back then, when we put, say, a project team into their project in the goggles, the reactions were really cool, really neat. Like it was what got you out of bed in the morning because you couldn't wait to see their faces and to sort of hear them sort of say like, oh wow, I didn't realize it felt like this, or this actually feels a bit tight. Let's. So it was starting to. It was the medium that was allowing them to interrogate their designs, and as a project team, but also clients. When you put clients in it, it was a medium that was intuitive and that they could understand. We weren't asking them to read sections, plans, elevations, and interpret those drawings. We were putting them in something that was just so natural and relatable, and in that, it was the common ground, I guess. VR was becoming the common ground between the designer and the client.
Did it in any? So I mean, I'm trying to put myself in the stage where you said you're going to do VR, right? And you're obviously trying to evangelize. And a lot of the job of an innovator and experimenter is this idea that you have to evangelize this thing. How hard was the sell? I mean, one of the things is cart before the horse thing. Do I sell the concept before, or should I just build it and then prove it, right? What did you do?
The latter, yeah, definitely the latter. I think in most of our projects that we're working on in this digital innovation space, there's a need to prove it works to a degree, and so with the VR stuff, it was like, oh, I'm just going to get on and do it and explore it and not make too much noise about it, because you're wanting to fail fast on this stuff as well, and so you don't want to burn all of this time making up a business case and then spend a day and then working on it, and then all of a sudden
is fail fast a thing that exists in architecture? I mean, I wouldn't think so. Break the building
fast,
down. No.
Failing slow. Yeah.
Hey, how do you what's your equivalent of? Because I guess when I talk to you, I get a sense that you sit on this boundary and the cusp of these two worlds. One is this digital space, which is all new and shiny and fast, and then the architecture space, which is slow. I won't say slow. I mean, it's fairly fast now, but the idea, the pace of, the work's bigger, the time scale is bigger.
Yeah.
How do you resolve that?
Well, we, it is still quite a traditional process and workflow, and I think I'm trying to look at how new and emerging technology can, make us go faster or work smarter.
Right.
Ultimately to deliver a better quality project outcome for the clients. Like that's why we're here. So we need to be. So we try and be as client-centric with all the projects that we do. Where we need to keep reminding ourselves why we're doing this and why we're here. But we've found that there's so much opportunity because it's such a long process in terms of delivering really complex projects. We are having to focus We're having to be really focused at where we put our energy, so into what part of the design process we're trying to enhance. Because, you know, in the early phases of me being in this role, you know, we were fumbling our way a little, and you know, now we have real clarity around the direction that we're heading and where we need to put our energies. But at first it was sort of, you know, let's test this, you know, and then, oh no, actually it looks like we should take that in a different direction. But we've quickly found that we need to be very focused with our energies. We've only got so much time, so much treasure to spend on this stuff.
And how long did that revelation take? Because that's one of the key revelations in you know, experimenting and innovating, is like, okay, at what stage do you just say, nah, let's just stop it?
It's probably...
Oh, no, what was the event for you that made you realize?
Oh, well, I guess the best example is probably in the design automation space that we're operating in. There's that's a really key theme that we're
And when you say design automation, do you think or talk about, are you talking about like the regenerative design, or are you talking about...
Really good question. So for us, we use design automation as an umbrella term.
Right.
For me, there's sort of two areas under that. One is design automation from a generative design point of view. So, you know, at the front end of projects, you're using coding to generate a design that you'd otherwise not be able to come up with manually, or you're using generative design to generate, say, thousands of design options rather in the same amount of time as you're normally generating one or two. There's then the next side of it. The other side of it is, so that's the kind of more glamorous side of it. The other side is in the delivery phase of a project. So we're using coding to automate the repetitive and mundane tasks that go with documenting a building. So it's not the glamorous stuff, but it's the efficiency gain stuff. And so, yeah, so design automation for me is those two. Those two streams.
So one is obviously the actual design of the figure, you know, and the other one is sort of the process,
delivery,
BAU,
how you document it, how you model it, and how you deliver.
And how mature is both those things? Like how mature is I'm assuming that digitizing processes has been around for a long time, but regenerative design and using machine learning is fairly new?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're learning at a million miles an hour on that front, but we're starting to get some really good direction. And what was interesting for me, like to go back to my early days here at Jasmax, and I guess this is how one of the reasons why I moved into this role was, back then, you know, I started to become really, really conscious of the skill sets of our graduates. You know, they were coming out of uni with, you know, with this capability in coding and visual scripting, and I saw, you know, little pockets of, you know, people working on certain projects, leveraging some of this capability, and then so we thought, well, you know, what if we wrap a bit of structure around them, bring them together as a group, and point them in a meaningful, you know, direction, so to kind of channel that energy, and so that's sort of what helped to lead me into this role as a permanent, you know, in a permanent way.
We're talking about, like, obviously using code to design stuff, and then it starts to bring up the question about what is the value of human creativity in the design iteration process. I mean, you're effectively now, you know, you obviously do some sort of modeling, and you obviously put some parameters in, I want this, and then it spits out 1,000. You know, a human is not capable of 1,000 iterations of something in a second.
So that is a really interesting question, because our first design automation project from a generative design point of view was something that we called the mass maker. So
mass maker.
The mass maker. So we looked at we said, now we were using an Autodesk offering which is called Project Fractal, which is like a cloud-based generative design engine. That's probably not the best way of describing it, but to me that's what it was. And so we took, it would allow us to take a Dynamo script. So Dynamo is Autodesk's visual scripting language in Revit. Revit's our core modeling package. So it would take that Dynamo script and it would generate every possible option based on the parameters that you've defined. So we said, well, okay, let's use this in the feasibility phase of a project. So in the same amount of time that we might generate 2 or 3 options, can we generate 2 or 300?
Right.
And it turns out 2 or 3,000
right.
we can generate. But the so that was really compelling.
Yeah.
And
but was that scary though? Like, I mean, as an architect, you know, there's someone, because, you know, I was a photographer at one stage and I decided to quit photography the minute Instagram got popular. Do you know what I mean? What is this something like that? Or is it going, no, this is going to make me better?
Yeah, it was, well, we thought that it was going to make us go faster, right. But also deliver more options to the client. But we were trying to get to the optimum option. And the problem we found was that, okay, yeah, we can generate 2 or 3,000 options, but they're rubbish. They're all rubbish options. Right. And so to get the quality into those options, we had to code so many variables. And at that point, we're like, well, hey, hang on, what are we doing? You know, we're trying to remove the designer from the process. Right. And so at that point, it was like, okay, hang on, that this isn't. We're not using this technology in the right way. We're not pointing it at the right
there
problem.
is still, because of the human intuition, there is still space for, because
you were, that exercise was asking us to unpack our process as designers, and then when you got into it, it was actually super complex, more complex than you realize, and you're like, well, actually we've got to code that, and then we've got to code that, and we've got to allow for that, and all moves that you're making as a designer like this. And so that was a point, that was a bit of a, you know,
fascinating.
Yeah, it was a really interesting.
But does it then, I mean, architects, in the history of what I at least know from art and architecture, is that they have been celebrity architects. They have been
Starchitects.
That's a good term. I didn't know Starchitects. That's kind of cool.
It's a thing. I'm not one of them.
I didn't know that. I didn't know this. That was the first good learning for that word. Yeah. But the history of they have been, you know, these icons and these personalities, and with the amount of, you know, the sort of sheer explosion of creativity that's happening using digital tools and stuff, is that even possible now, or is it become like
to be a star?
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like,
that's a really good question. That's a very good question. I guess you've got Zaha Hadid, for example. You know, I guess with a lot of these architects, you know, their design, their approach to design, their aesthetic, I guess, that they have developed is probably what sets them apart and has allowed them to sort of, you know, elevate kind of above the rest because of a really clear identity, you know, to the work that they do. And so I guess Zaha, you know, I guess being an early adopter of tech and computational design, that was her edge and allowed her to kind of develop a language that was uniquely hers. Right. But now, I guess with and I guess they were probably creating a lot of custom programming and software to allow them to, you know, to keep progressing. And now I guess as software and this kind of capability, as technology becomes more ubiquitous and accessible, then, you know, a lot more people can do a kind of a Zaha-esque spaceship. Yeah. So, yeah, that's an interesting question. My gut feeling would be, wow, it's maybe harder to differentiate.
Right.
Possibly. Right. Maybe you're trying to differentiate in a different way, and it's not, you know, it's about maybe a multi-value proposition that you bring into your clients, not just, you know, all of my buildings have this sort of approach and look and feel and everything. Well, we're actually bringing this other value to us, and that's what we're trying to do at Jasmax and with digital innovation. Is we're trying to use technology to deliver to the clients, you know, key requirements, key needs, because it's not about just doing beautiful buildings. You know, that's not. I mean, we try and do that. But that's certainly not the main thing that, you know, a client comes to us for. They've got a problem, a much more meaningful problem that they want solved.
Coming back to beauty and VR, which we talked about. So I'm assuming that after you obviously experimented, now it's also become your production workflow, right? Like now most of your
part of our
every one of your pitches or state of things there are right now, you go into VR and show the client. Yeah. So, and as you guys are artists you first study art and then study architecture in a lot of ways, right? So, what's the balance between the form and utility that you guys emphasize on when you're in VR space trying to explain this concept? Because it does the balance, and obviously when the client looks at it and goes, I don't like it, and then there's this obvious subjective experience of what I think a beautiful space looks like. How do you guys resolve that balance, or how do you, do architects have come in and say, you shouldn't have showed them the thing because now I've got to become more form focused or more beauty focused?
No, look, absolutely. Like with any means of communication, you need to control the conversation. You need to control the communication. So, it depends where you're using VR. If it's the early phase of a project, we find you need to be very careful to not show too much. Or if you're just talking about space planning, you don't want any materiality in there. You just want to deliver a white experience. And so we can control the conversation and focus it around the Balkan location, the massing, or the spatial experience. So you've got to be careful as a project team to not get ahead of yourself. Because if we slapped a few materials around that space, then all of a sudden, the client will be asking, are we really going to be using concrete there or timber there or something? And you're months off those conversations. So you've got to be very careful at what you're putting in front of people, because they're going to react.
So I obviously signed in there, and I saw your name. I sign in. You mean Tim Stevens? Knowledge and innovation.
That's the team that I sit in. Yeah.
Right. So, what does it mean, knowledge and innovation? Like, it almost seems like you're not the wise owl. Are you guys the wise owl sitting in the?
No, Jasmax is quite unique in that we have sort of a centralized resource, which is a knowledge and innovation team. So it's.
So what do you mean by knowledge? I guess the innovation team makes sense.
It's the brains trust.
Right.
So we've got
right.
So we've got some really experienced, really valuable people in that team, in the, in different areas of the business. So we've got legal, we've got
so legal sits in
technical
knowledge.
Yes, we've got legal, we've got technical,
That's
we've got
weird.
visualization.
Is it weird to have innovation and I won't say legacy, but like a really bureaucratic is the right word? Like, where it's very process-based and stuff like legal?
It's a really eclectic mix of people, but we're all sort of experts in our different fields.
Right.
And so we're a support group, I guess, for the business. So, you've got some really experienced technical people that ensure that we deliver projects the best way we can. Same for for legal, visualization team is in there as well. So it's how we communicate our projects.
So that's interesting. So basically what the team is end to end how to make something happen in a lot of ways.
How it's enabling, we try and we're supporting and enabling the business to be, I guess as operationally, excellent as possible. How can we, in all of the different parts of the process, how can we be doing it the best possible way? And so at Jasmax, that's a central team. It's knowledge and innovation team, and a lot of other practices don't necessarily operate like that. But
I have not heard of a knowledge and innovation team. So
it could be called different things in different practices, but it's something that has been under development for quite a long time, and I think it gives Jasmax a bit of an edge. We can be very focused about where we put our energies, I think. So it's been very successful for Jasmax.
So VR, successful implementation, and that sort of, and you led it, right? Like you were the guy, the VR guy at that stage.
Yeah.
So does that And now coming back to you, like personally, right? Like, and I know innovation or being the go-to guy in digital and being the forefront of whatever does have that, it does add to that pressure to succeed. Like, yeah, no, we can do it, and he's going to make it possible, right? How do you resolve a lot of that? I think I'll talk about internal conflict of the expectation of what's actually possible. I mean, a lot of things had to go right for you to implement VR right time. I mean, VR has been around for 25 years, but it's now at the point. How often do you get that, oh, let's make this impossible thing happen because it's the next thing, just because you've done it already? You know, what is the impossible expectation put on you for next things, you know?
I think really, I'm reasonably comfortable in that space, because I think the key is to be very realistic and to, you know, ultimately under promise and over deliver, because you could come unstuck and lose organizational.
Have you been unstuck before?
Not so far. Touch wood.
Touch wood.
Touch
Yeah.
No, I think.
I like how we said laminate, because architects.
There's no wood anywhere. There's no wood in the world anywhere.
Architects would just know the material.
I think this actually is timber. It's being very realistic and being very upfront with people to manage expectations. You know, constantly manage expectations. But just to, you know, we try and go through our, you know, projects in a really logical, methodical way, but also always bringing it back to the core business, and, you know, so we're not off burning time and energy and money in an area that just won't deliver value to the business and our clients. So that's been a really interesting learning for me in operating, and, you know, well, I'm not in project work anymore, and I guess I'm using or developing a different skill set now, which is super rewarding for me, because it's really stimulating. I'm learning. I'm just learning all the time. So, but you know, you're exercising all levels of all of your diplomacy capabilities, and you know, because a lot of it is getting people, you know, joining different people up and forming teams, and then, you know,
and that brings me to my next question. Like, so what does that day look like? I mean, obviously, what does your day as the innovation guy at one of the leading architecture firms look like? I mean, how much are you evangelizing? How much are you setting up meetings? How much are you researching? How much are you actually tinkering? I mean, have you stopped tinkering? Do you still tinker?
No, I think it's probably a bit of all of that, absolutely, and that's why I love it, because there's so much variety in it. But yeah, there's tinkering yourself, because there's a point at, I need to tinker to a degree to just kind of unpack something enough that I can then realize, okay, it's a real project or not, and if it's a real project, then we'll maybe wrap a team around it and everything. So there's always some tinkering to be done on my side. A lot of, some of it's strategy, so to work out, you know, so to not blindly go into the next year and just sort of, you know, make it up as we go. You know, we did a digital innovation strategy piece a year or so ago, which defined where we would be going and spending our time.
And how long is that cadence? Like, what's that cycle time between coming up with new strategies?
Well, we set...
Because I'm assuming you're not like in a corporate life cycle of, you know, FY.
No, I think we did a piece of work, you know, a year ago, which looked at, when I first got into the role, we looked at all of these different global megatrends and profession-related trends and everything, to work out where we should invest our energies. And that's where, you know, we identified 5 different areas, and then we focused in on 2, and those 2 were design automation and BIM, which is building information modeling. That's how we deliver our projects. So we've got some really good direction there, you know, like just in those 2 areas. If we only spent our energy on those 2 areas, it'd be really valuable. And then, you know, emerging technologies like AR and VR, we're in a really good position there. We're in a really good place there, and so it's just a matter of kind of ensuring that we're still, you know, at the leading edge, but we're going to actually focus the bulk of our energies in these other areas, which are to keep us future fit. So yeah, that's the strategy side, and you're always looking at, you know, you're always absorbing, you know, on social media, LinkedIn, and, you know, all of those channels to absorb what's happening out there in the industry to make sure that you're current. So I'm always doing that.
But is your day job mostly around meetings and evangelizing, or is it?
Well, some days you won't.
Because I know you're a busy guy. We tried to get this meeting together, and it was like, next year.
Oh,
so
but
clearly very busy.
Well, we're only a few weeks from the end of the year, so
that's right.
You didn't have to wait a year.
That's right. I actually did. That's pretty good. But is it busy?
It is. It's. I guess the real challenge with the role is because you're operating in so many different areas, talking to so many different people, trying to make so many different things happen, and joining different people up, and strategizing and tinkering. From a time management point of view, you've got to be quite disciplined.
So what's your time management productivity hack at the moment?
Well, I did a management, a leadership training course recently, last year actually, and there was a really interesting concept which was these quadrants, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Q1 was, and it allowed you to kind of break down all the different things that you could be doing to work out what the priorities are. Q1 was, critical emergency stuff, like the aircon unit's leaking on your desk, or there's a fire or something, and so Q1 is that sort of stuff. But Q2 is the stuff that only you can do, and it is the most important stuff that you could be spending your time on. And Q3 is sort of other people's agendas. It's responding to that email from someone else. That isn't core to your role, and that's the distracting stuff. And so to work out what is Q2 and what is Q3 has been really valuable. So I know that.
What's Q4? Is this nonsense?
Q4 is just
trade
me. It's cat memes.
Right. So and sort of this was taught to you guys in that,
Yes, and that was a great tool because you could.
But are you reflecting on that every day? I'm assuming that. This is
maybe not every day, but every week or so, where I've got a list and I use OneNote to, and I've got tabs for Q2 and Q3, and so when I'm in a meeting and I've got an action, I'll think, okay, was this a Q2 or Q3? And then I'll put it in there. So I've got a list of things to do. Q2 is much smaller but very important. Q3 is much longer. But it's really great because it makes you realize, well, hang on, my time's really valuable, and I don't need to get back to this person, in terms of other people's agenda. I don't need to get back to them like that. They can wait. I've got very important stuff to do over here. So
I want to steal this. This is stolen now. It's become my system.
I didn't invent it, obviously.
I'll call it the Tim system. So, what I want to talk about is also, one part of, before I want to get to the challenges of architecture in general, one of the things I want to talk about is, inherent to the creative practice is the anxiety of the creative practice, right? Which is, where's my next idea coming from, right? Do architects in the modern world, with the plethora of information that you can get inspired from, is that, and especially with digital innovation coming in fast, in a lot of ways stealing a lot of jobs, right? What is the sort of anxiety management for an architect, at the moment, or anything engineering, big projects?
That's interesting. It's really interesting because I'm not acting as a in a designer role at the moment, but I guess yes, there's just so much stimulation out there, so much inspiration, from resources like Pinterest, and we didn't have that back at uni.
Libraries, right? Like that's where you
old
would
school,
go,
right?
Or
we
go
had to
there.
Go old school. Go there.
The inspiration to architecture was just going to Europe, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so, there's no shortage of inspiration, but with that, I guess we need to be very careful that design has an appropriate depth of thinking behind it, and it's not this sort of this shell that just falls away as soon as it's value managed, or so it's there's risk there, and and we need to be very careful and ensure it has some it has the the intellectual thought behind the design, but from a technical point of view, it can be an overwhelming world, I think, because there's more and more pressure to go faster from clients, to deliver faster. It's only becoming a more complex world that we live in, and architecture is no different. It's So with all of this, technology and opportunity, it's not necessarily simplifying the process. It's just different. It may be more efficient, but then that means that we'll just be busy doing other stuff over here. It's not like we won't, you know.
So what's the coping mechanism though? Like how are you?
You've got to love what you do, right?
Right.
You do.
So
with anything, you've got to love what you do. Yeah. I mean, as long as it's what gets you out of bed in the morning. And I guess for a lot of designers, you know, it's a passion, and you know, it's an amazing creative outlet. Being able to being in a position to design and deliver and define the built environment, and that was my I guess motivation for those complex and transport infrastructure projects was, you know, you're really leaving a stamp, your mark on the world, and hopefully a positive one. But there's a bit of a legacy that, you know, it's a really rewarding profession. I've found.
So what are in general, like, and now sort of going back to like Eagleview, what are the innovation is generally fraught with challenges anyway. It's inherent to what it is. So what are the core themes or trends of challenges you're seeing within the digital innovation space and architecture? Like, what are the things that you're going, ooh, this is a bit sticky, you know, we got to work this out?
There's a big one for me is resourcing.
Right.
Resourcing
So you mean technical resourcing, or you mean
people to explore a project, to develop a project. You know, like we.
You have a manpower story.
What's that?
Is it a manpower thing?
In a large way, yes. But it's also a sort of a business, a commercial conversation, because, you know, it costs money to do R&D.
Right.
And so you're asking the business to take a punt, you know, it's a risk. And so you need to, we're needing to kind of scale appropriately. So we started off using, those grads were working on projects. We were protecting a little part of their time, a portion of their time to do these projects alongside their project work. And that's how we started. And there's challenges with that. You know, you're trying to ask people to do dual duties. You know, they're under project pressures, trying to meet project deadlines, but then you're also trying to get them to, you know, ask them to, you know, spend X number of hours delivering this project on the side. And so they're constantly at odds with each other, and we'll always find that project work overrules our digital innovation work. So that's been super frustrating. But we're slowly getting to the point where, you know, we're proving the value in spending time on these areas, and so the business is becoming more and more, you know, open to people spending more time, or dedicated people spending time on these non-project, non-fee earning exercises. So it's a kind of a slow burn on that. You know, you need to build that that comfort within the business and its shareholders.
So how ruthless are you in shutting down projects? Or like, you know, rabbit holes that you think maybe just not? Are you ruthless?
Well, we don't shut them down.
I know I'm ruthless. I'm like, nope.
Well, we don't shut them down because if we'd done our due diligence right, we wouldn't be in that position. And so we do our homework.
Right.
And that's about, you know, that whole having a methodical approach, and, you know, and making it business-centric, client-centric.
Can you give you give us an example of a stupid thing that you said, this is stupid, but everyone else thought it was a good idea?
Everyone else thought, so something that didn't work for me?
Or rather, like, you know, you are in the game, so you know, like, where it's going and stuff, and someone else comes and says, well, let's do this, and you're like, this is so stupid. But
oh, yeah. And that's when you're exercising your, your diplomacy, your soft skills.
What was the technology?
I don't.
Okay, tell me what the technology
I don't actually. I can't recall. I don't get that often. Thank God. No, but
they exist, right? Like,
oh, absolutely. Look, you're getting, you're getting. No, but that's all part of it, you know, because you're trying to draw on different areas of the business, different people, and you know, people come up with you or send you an email of like, hey, this opportunity, or what about this idea, and that's fantastic, because then you'll bring, you know, I'll bring my sort of experience to it and kind of give it that first level of analysis, and if to them it might have sounded like a fantastic idea, and then I'm, you know, if it sort of doesn't meet with our core objectives, then I might give that feedback. I might say, yeah, that's interesting. Well, you know, and I'll just give feedback on where that might live in our priorities, if it's real or
Tim Stevens, the architect,
the
digital
nice
guy,
as much as possible,
and the politician. So tell me, okay, last few questions. What is your sort of, you know, I'll give you a certain amount of money, you're playing some bets, what are the bets that you're going to make in terms of sort of innovation within architecture over the next 5 years and 15 years? Like, what's the thing 15? That you're going to, I mean, it takes, how many years, how long does it take to build a big building? 10 years?
There's some big projects out there.
Especially in urban planning, because I think you're like, so what are the things, you know, what are the things that I should be investing in that you think is going to pay off?
Well, I guess we're investing in how we design and how we deliver. Right. So design is the design automation. You know, why we want to automate parts of our design processes, we want to focus on the high value work. And it's not all high value in the traditional, in the current process, and so that's where we're trying to automate those repetitive and mundane tasks, because we want to be working smarter. And so in 5 years' time, I think we will be working smart. We already are working smarter, but you know, in 5 years' time, I think, you know, those that are delivering a project, those technicians, architects, etc., I'd like to think that they'll be bouncing out of bed in the morning, because they can come to work and they're not doing, you know, really mundane, low value work. They can come to work and do the stuff that really gets them excited, really engages them, really makes it worth getting out of bed. So I think we'll see. I don't think we're going to see we're not going to lose jobs through automation. We're actually going to redefine jobs. You know, we're going to make them more enjoyable.
But that's what, you know, a lot of innovation guys, you know, having these conversations, that's the constant theme, is that the jobs aren't really going anywhere.
They're just changing for the better is the idea.
The mundanity is going away.
Yeah, ideally. So in 5 years, and I guess from a delivery point of view, in the next 5 years, we're going to see, you know, I guess it's been very slow to transition out of that traditional delivery sort of paradigm where we're producing a set of drawings, printed out drawings to build a building from. You know, we're moving to BIM, building information modeling, or building information models.
And I just I understand BIM. It's a process, or is it a methodology? You know, is it a methodology, or is it an actual?
It's all of those things. So, you know, traditionally,
like, what was it compared to? Like,
drawing on a drawing board, right? A sheet, sheet of paper. You know, I'm going to draw, you know, with my pen, a floor plan and a section elevation on a drawing board. That was then digitized, and you're doing the same thing in a computer. You're still drawing.
So now you don't ask for drawings; you ask for.
No, you're actually modeling. You're actually modeling. So you're modeling a wall, and so you might draw it in plan, but it has a height and it has a thickness, and it's made up of all of this stuff. So at the end of that process, you've actually got a model. And so we're, you know, in 5 years' time, there'll be more, I guess, more of that BIM. A more BIM delivered, BIM delivery. It's hard to explain. You're going to see models being used more for to build buildings and to consent buildings as well. You know, to consent projects as well.
So if it fits my model, you know, or rather it fits this model that we've built, you know.
Yeah, it's a really complex process, and so it's been a really slow burn. And you know, the construction.
And this is globally, right? This is not just New Zealand. This is how architecture is moving.
It is, and so there's so many. You know, to design and deliver and to build and then to occupy a building is a hell of a complex process. You know, and so there's so many different parts of it that, you know. So if you're trying to innovate here, you might hit a brick wall here in terms of. You know, and something out of your control. You know, maybe it's consenting or whatever. So. Yeah, it's a slow burn, but we're slowly getting there. So in 5 years' time, I think we'll see, maybe more buildings being built from models rather than drawings and everything. And you know, I guess immersive technologies will continue to develop. You know, VR is really in a strong place. We'll probably see AR mature a lot more.
But are you banking on AR being a tool that you guys use more of?
There's a time and place for it. You know, like we've explored AR. You know, but VR, we're not always on site. We're not designing on site, and so that's where AR is best leveraged. And so we're always, you know, in our office, we're having meetings in this space. And so VR and the fact that we can transport someone into that space, and it doesn't matter where we are, is currently the most valuable tool from an immersive technologies point of view that we've got. So, but we're keeping our eye on AR, and there's some AR projects that we think we could develop that.
Are you working on any AR stuff at the moment?
Yeah, so there is a project there where we might, you know, we might develop an app that allows project teams to have a suite of their models. So workplace, for example, they might have a suite of all of their workplace elements, you know, desks, soft seating and all of that. And, you know, with an iPad go into a client space and actually workshop a design with them in real time, in their real space. And, you know, really engage with a, you know, kind of democratizing design, you know, allowing the client to actually design with them. So that's where we might use AR, but yeah, it's but our focus is probably, our primary focus is in that design automation space and the delivery phase at the moment.
Cool. So how do you give back to people who want to get more knowledge from you? Do they just get in touch with you on Twitter and they'd be like, so how do people get in touch with you? If they want,
yeah, well,
you know, more information about innovation and
well, I'm you know, I think I know of the value of collaboration, and so I've taken that approach, very much taken that approach through in this role, and so. You know, and we're not super precious about IP as well, because speed is the new IP, you know, and so we're not protective. You know, we're so happy to talk about, you know, what we're doing and what we're learning and what we're exploring, and we do. And I talk at you know, at conferences and everything to try and, you know, demonstrate what we've learned and where we're going, because I think I'm in a really unique position here, in that Jasmax is of a scale that actually can afford, and, you know, as someone working in this role permanently, so I'm really fortunate to be in this role, and so it's always great to sort of be able to give back to the industry by being available and collaborating.
Well, thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Clint,
for being on XP42, and hopefully someday we'll call Tim a architect.
Not likely. Thanks, Clint.